Hello everybody, this is Brett Lonsdale from Lightning Tools. Welcome to my session this afternoon on business connectivity services and our products, the BCS MetaMan tool, as well as the chart and the data viewer. Yeah, welcome everybody. I hope you find this session useful. It is being recorded, so if you have the need to watch it back again, or if you have any colleagues that might benefit from watching the recording, you'll be able to find that on our website later on today on lightningtools.com, and then underneath the community link you'll see a link to webcasts, and there's also some previous webcasts that we've been recording as well. So this is all about business connectivity services. We're going to cram as much as we can into the next hour. Hopefully you'll get a lot of information about business connectivity services itself in SharePoint, but also have a look at our products as well and how they can help you connect to lots of different external data sources, as well as build powerful views and dashboards involving the data viewer and the chart web parts. So there's three of our products that we'll be able to explore today, and should we get time, there's also a fourth one as well. We have a tool that we provide called the ERP Connect, and that allows you to also connect to SAP for business connectivity services as well. Okay, so yeah, first of all, just a couple of bits to mention. There is a couple of books that I've written on the subject of business connectivity services, and prior to that, the Business Data Catalog. That's not me in the photo on the right hand side, but that is one of the books that I wrote along with my former partner Nick Swan, SharePoint MVP, and on the left is the book on business connectivity services, which I authored with colleagues Penny Coventry and also Phil Duffy. There isn't a SharePoint 2013 Business Connectivity Services book. Most of the 2010 material is exactly the same as the 2013, and writing a book is a little bit like getting drunk. If you get drunk too badly, then you always swear the next day that you're never going to put yourself through that again. And the same thing happens whenever you write a book. Until somebody comes along and says, would you like to write a book? And then you think it's such a wonderful idea. Having said that, I have recently written a chapter on business connectivity services, which wasn't too bad, and that was for Bill English's book on administrating Office 365. So there is a bit there about using BCS. It covers most of the high-level topics on using BCS in an Office 365 SharePoint Online environment. So a couple of things that you might want to look out for. What we're going to be looking at today, we'll have a fairly fast-paced sort of introduction to business connectivity services, and you're going to see hopefully lots of that along the way. That includes just having a look at the architecture of BCS, but also having a look at some of the individual components, like the external list, the web parts, the external data column, some of the Office client integration, also search as well. So all things that you can do with data in the back end. One thing that BCS is not is just a view of external data in SharePoint. It goes way beyond that. There are third-party tools that allow you to just simply display external data, or write back to external data. This does so much more. It's you have web parts that you can display. You can have connected web parts. The external list allows you to treat external content like any other internal list, effectively. And then we can also look at metadata using the external data column as well. And some of the Word integration, the Excel and the Outlook integration is just really powerful. So we'll also have a look at where we fit in. Lightning Tools has been providing products for Business Data Catalog, as it was then back in SharePoint 2007, all the way through to present day, where we've got SharePoint 2013 and Office 365. And hopefully you'll be pleased to know that we've also done a lot of testing with SharePoint 2016 as well, with BCS MetaMan and also the data viewer and the chart web parts. So they're pretty much ready to go. There's a few things to iron out, but they'll soon be available for SharePoint 2016 as well. Okay, so those of you that are new to business connectivity services, this is just a slide kind of explaining roughly what it is and what benefits it brings to your organizations. So it doesn't really matter what size of organization you work for. What you tend to find is each individual department across the organization typically has a piece of software to run that department. So whether it's a CRM system for sales, whether it's an accountancy tool for your accounts department, whether it's a human resources database in HR, it doesn't really matter. There's lots of different solutions that we go out and purchase to run a particular business process, usually within a department. What SharePoint allows us to do is to connect to those external systems and bring that data into one place. So we have not just our documents stored in document libraries and our list content stored in lists, but we can bring everything together. We can bring all this external data. Doesn't matter if it's Oracle, whether it's something in Salesforce.com, whether it's Dynamics CRM, custom SQL database, you can bring that data into SharePoint or link to it from SharePoint and be able to do so much with it. Again, not just display it, but also write back to it if you wish. You can search that data and use it throughout Microsoft Office as well. So it certainly makes the data a lot more accessible to your users. It also helps minimize training requirements because somebody just wants to look for a small piece of information, doesn't have to be an expert in SAP in order to find that information. They can simply go to SharePoint and find it from there. Okay, so what basically makes all of this happen, we've got a high-level view of business connectivity services on the page here. So if we just concentrate on the diagram, you'll notice that we've split between SharePoint Server and Microsoft Office Client. And on the SharePoint Server, we've got all those components that we mentioned. So web parts giving us a read-only view of the data. We have the search capability. We've got the external data column. There's also an API, the object model, that allows us to build custom solutions that use the data, and user profile imports as well, and finally the external list. So all of that's going on the server side, but the Office client applications also integrate so well with BCS as well. So you can bring data in as contacts, as calendar items and tasks and so on into Outlook. Excel gives you some great synchronization. So does Access, Visio, and so on. So the Office client is very powerful with all this external data. Now, what we're basically going to be building, we need to know this to understand really what BCS MetaMan is doing, is we're going to be building something called an external content type. And an external content type basically describes the data that we're going to be connecting to. It handles all of the different properties. So the column names are all defined with their data types, and we've got some methods that will allow us to get at the data as well. So for instance, we have what's known as a finder method wrapped inside that external content type. That's one of the two required methods. So the finder method allows us to basically connect to a table, a view, or a store procedure, bring back all of the columns within it and all of the rows of data within it, and display them in SharePoint. So if you imagine a web part on the page full of data, that's the finder method being called. We also have a specific finder. That's the other required method. So the specific finder allows us to select a single row and open it. So basically what we're doing there is passing through the identifier. So when we click on a row that the finder method has populated, we open up one item, and that is based on maybe the customer ID or the employee ID or something like that from that table, and passing that through to that specific finder. The external content type also contains some other methods like creator, updater, deleter. These are all optional, so whether you want to write back to that data source or not. It also controls how we want to authenticate with the data and the type of connector that we're going to use in order to connect to that database. So when we create this external content type, the properties that we defined all get written back to a SQL database called the metadata store, and that has nothing to do with managed metadata, so it's a bad choice of a name for that database. So the metadata store is a business connectivity services database. It doesn't store data, it just stores the definition of the data that we're going to be connecting to using BCS. Okay, so that in mind, we'll build an external content type in just a moment, and the product that we're going to use to build that is BCS MetaMan. You don't have to use BCS MetaMan. I'll talk about some other products that you could use as well, and then we'll also have a look at extending what you can do in the user interface with some of our web parts, so the data viewer and also the chart web part. And like I say, we'll have a look at lots of the out-of-the-box stuff as well. So first of all, we'll take a look at BCS MetaMan. Now, if you wanted to create an external content type, so you might want to connect to an SQL database, then first thing you could do is go into Microsoft SharePoint Designer. And those of you that have been around a little while will know that Microsoft SharePoint Designer is free. So you can basically use Microsoft SharePoint Designer. You can create an external content type in it, save it out to the managed metadata store, and that's it. You've got some data available to you throughout SharePoint. If you want to connect to SQL, that's fine. If you want to connect to anything else, then typically you have to write code. So Visual Studio is the tool that you then turn to, and with that, you get a bit of a head start. You get a managed metadata diagram that allows you to define all of the properties and your methods and so on, but you do have to write the code in order to connect to that external data source. So you can do that, and that's known as compiled code. So you can create a .NET assembly that allows you to expose that data to SharePoint, or you can create what's known as a BDC model file, BDCM file, and that is basically XML describing how you're going to connect to your data and bring it into SharePoint. So both of those two options require code of some sort. And that's why we have BCS MetaMan. We find that lots of our customers don't have time to write that code, let alone learn how to write that code and then fix any bugs that are in it that they might find. So BCS MetaMan is basically a code generation tool that allows you to build it without having to write any code at all. Within a few minutes, you can connect to your data, put it into SharePoint, and then you're ready to go. So we're going to jump into BCS MetaMan right now. So BCS MetaMan, it's a Windows application. It's been around, like I say, since SharePoint 2007. So if you use SharePoint 2007 Enterprise, you could use BDC MetaMan back in the day. You could also use Visual Studio's version of BCS MetaMan in 2010, so you could create external content types using that. And then today we've got BCS MetaMan for Windows, which is a Windows application, and that works with both Office 365 and also SharePoint 2013 as well. So on the left hand side here is a number of different data sources that we can connect to. So right at the very top we've got Dynamics CRM, so the Dynamics Online, so you can provide a URL to your Dynamics environment, username, password, and Secure Store, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, that handles the authentication. You can also connect to OData, and OData is a great option if you've got SharePoint in the cloud and you've got your external data on premises. So how can we expose that data that's on our network, perhaps behind a firewall, and display it inside SharePoint Online or a hosted SharePoint environment? And typically the answer is OData is one of the options. So you can expose that external data source as OData and then connect to it via a service effectively. So that's an option for you there. There's lots of different ODBC data sources that we provide, so you can see your list here. All of these are using ODBC, but the list of ODBC data sources is not limited to that. You can effectively use the other data source option and build your own connection string, and connectionstrings.com is a great place to go to look at those connection strings for most data sources. So if we were connecting to Microsoft Access or anything like that, you can see that we already built the connection string for you. You just basically fill in the gaps as to what your machine is called, the server's called, and so on. And of course, you need to have the ODBC driver installed. But apart from that, that's it. You should be able to connect to them. So yeah, there's MySQL, there's Access, there's Infomix, DB2, so on and so forth in that list. We can also connect to Oracle directly. You can connect to salesforce.com. We can connect to SQL, and we can also connect to a WCF web service. And don't be fooled by the WCF service. It's not any WCF service. You need to effectively write your service that exposes those finder and specific finder methods that we talked about. So they have to be, if you like, BCS friendly in order to use them. So sometimes you might have some web services that already expose data, but you might have to wrap them in your own custom web service in order to expose the data properly for business connectivity services to understand. So it doesn't matter which one we select. Effectively, you're going to be providing three pieces of information on this next step. One of them is, where's the data? What server is it stored on? How do you want to authenticate is the next option. So there's two things here. How is BCS MetaMan going to authenticate? But once we've deployed the model to SharePoint, how is SharePoint going to authenticate? So we have two different levels here. What we could do is say, well, I want to use Windows authentication in order to authenticate, in which case that might work for me because I'm using a Windows application connecting straight to the database, and we can build the model and everything. And what we might do is deploy it to SharePoint and find it doesn't work. And the reason for that is if you're using NTLM as your network authentication protocol, and your SQL server is on a separate box to SharePoint, you're going to suffer what's known as the double hop issue. So it works very well when you're connecting via a Windows application, but if you're going from your browser to IIS and then IIS to SQL, that's two hops, and therefore you won't be able to authenticate. So for that reason, you could do a couple of things. You could use the NTLM, you could use Kerberos instead of NTLM and create some trusts, or you can use the Secure Store. So Secure Store is the recommended option. That is something that you can configure in SharePoint, and Secure Store basically maps credentials together. So you could have, for example, your entire sales department connecting to the external data source as a single account name, or you can map user to user on an individual basis, or whatever you want to do. But it overcomes a double hop issue, which is the key thing. Or you can also use mixed mode if you like, so you can send across a username and password and authenticate that way. So there's a couple of options. So once we've connected, we can see a list of databases stored on that server. So here I'm going to simply go through and select a database. So there's the Northwind database, and then I hit this button here that is going to go and connect to that database for me. And if you get to this screen, that means it's great. You've successfully authenticated, at least with MetaMan. And as you start selecting the tables and the views and the stored procedures, you will start to see the data that you have available inside that database. So let's take, for example, customers. And this is a great thing. If anybody's used SharePoint Designer, you'll know that you have to actually key in the name of the database. You don't have a list to choose from like this. So yeah, we can see all of the data that's available, and we can drag it and drop it onto the design surface here. And that will allow us to start building the methods that we want to use in order to connect to that external data source. So we have the two required methods selected. We've got the finder method and we've got the specific finder. So just as let's quickly flick into SharePoint and I'll show you effectively what they are doing. So here, if we go into an external list, this external list has been populated with the finder method. It's got the column names, it's also got all of the rows. And what I can do is simply click the drop down and I can view that item. And as I select that view item, it's going and getting the product ID for the item that I selected and passing that to the specific finder. So that's this one here. Okay, we've also got the creator, the updater, and the deleter. So if we want to obviously be able to create items, update items, and delete items, we must have those three methods. But that's optional. If we want to make it read-only, we just don't select them. The last one is the ID enumerator. And the ID enumerator is used for the search indexing. So yeah, we have a way of indexing the content. It only exposes the identifier from that table, and then we can start to use the search once it's been indexed. So they're the methods I'm going to create. We've got the name of the external content type. We could change our mind if we want to call it something else. I like making those as user-friendly as possible so that our users know what customers is rather than dbo.custs or something like that. And we've also got the identifier highlighted. So the primary key is customer ID in this case, and we could choose a different one if we wanted to. So we hit create on that, and that creates our entity. Now we can make sure we've got the right data coming back. Just click into the right hand corner there, and we can see a preview of the data that's going to be returned, so we know we're getting the right data source. We can right click this entity and configure it, and that allows us to do several things. One, we can set a title column. This is something that's going to save us a bit of time inside the SharePoint UI. We can also specify the Office item type. That only has a bearing on Microsoft Outlook. So when you export the data into Outlook, it knows whether to bring it through as an appointment, a contact, a post, or a task. Okay. If we go to the Methods tab, you'll see all the methods that we created, and one of the things that we can do is start to add some filters to these methods as well. So here we can click on to Add Filter, give that filter a name, and what I'm going to do here is create one called a Limit Filter. The type of filter is Limit, and we can set the field that we want that to be based upon and the default value. So I'm just going to put in 1,000 there. And what that basically means is I'm not going to bring back more than 1,000 rows at any one time. Okay, so you can create those. They are optional, although if you don't create one, SharePoint will tell you that you didn't create one. So it's recommended to have a limit filter. We can also create other filters as well. So we've got wildcard filters and comparison filters and so on. They will have their use, and I'll explain why a little bit later as we start to get into the UI. I'm not going to create one just yet, but we'll come back and have a look at those very, very shortly. What we've also got on the right-hand side is all the fields that we're going to be returning. So here's the customer ID, we've got the company name and so on. Now notice there is a show in picker option. So I'm going to select that for the company name, and we'll also do the same for the contact name as well. I don't need all of the columns to be shown. What that allows me to do is when I look up the external data from a list or a library, they're the two columns that will show inside the picker, allowing me to identify each row that I want to return. So we'll save that. So that's been updated. We could at this point just click update, and that will update my entity for me. Okay. The other thing, of course, that we could do is if we just jump back into there, we can create what's known as an action as well. So here I'm going to create a Google search action. Okay, so we can select that, and what I'm going to do is just remove that customer ID and add in the company name into the Google parameter here. So what we can do is our users, once they're looking at this customer data inside a web part, they can just do a one-click action in order to be able to Google one of those customers. So that can be very useful indeed. So we'll again just update that, and that's created the customers entity. Now what we'll also do, and this won't take as long, we're just going to simply drag across orders as well, and I'm going to create the same methods on that. Click update, and I'm also going to do the same thing on order details and do exactly the same, create the same methods. Okay, and since I've now got 3 entities on the design surface here, what we can do is connect them together. So effectively we're reproducing the relationships that are in that underlying database. So I'm going to go from customer ID as my primary key to customer ID, my foreign key, and map them together. And we'll do the same between orders and order details as well. So what this allows us to do is once this external content type gets deployed to SharePoint, we can add 3 web parts on the page. So we can select a customer, see the orders for that customer, select an order, and see the order details for that customer. But you must create those associations before that can happen. Okay, so we're pretty much done. So what we're going to do is just go into the settings and give this a name. So we'll call this BCS Webinar. There's my model name, the lob system instance name as well. Sorry, the lob system name and the lob system instance name. So we can just identify those. It doesn't really matter what we call them at this point. I guess the only thing to really point out is make it user-friendly so everybody knows what it is. We can build this for SharePoint 2010 or for 2013, and we've also got the deployment URL. That deployment URL can be any site in your farm, because this is a farm-wide thing that we're deploying here. So it doesn't have to be any specific site at all. So we'll save that and hit deploy. Now I'm expecting 2 little warnings to come back. Hopefully nothing more than that. The 2 warnings will be on the orders and the order details table. I showed you how to create a limit filter on the customers table. I didn't create one on orders and order details, but that's just going to tell me that it's a good idea to create a limit filter, because those tables could eventually have millions of records in them. So yeah, there's the warnings. That's fine. It's flagged that up, but we should be deployed. So let's go back into SharePoint. What we'll have a look at first of all is Central Admin, and in here is a list of external content types. So we'll refresh the page here, and what we should see is that we've got customers here, as well as orders and order details. So there's the orders, and somewhere on the page will be order details. There we go, just above it. So that's what we've just created. So they've been defined, which is fantastic. So the next thing, we could go through and set permissions on that and so on. I've already got my permissions inherited from BCS itself. So the next thing for me to do is to test it. So what we'll do is we'll hit the drop down in SharePoint and we'll go and add an app, otherwise known as creating a list. So so in here we've got the types of lists that we can create. We'll go for the external list and we'll call this one customers. And here's the external content type where I can look that up. And in here, there's BCS webinar underscore system name, and there's customers there. So we'll select it, choose create, and there's my customers, and we've got that data. Okay, so like I said, that's linked to, it's not imported that data, it's linking directly to it, so you don't have any record locking issues here. It also means that we're not importing the data and therefore duplicating it. If we've got 100,000 customers, why would we put those 100,000 customers again inside SQL into a database, which is exactly what would happen if we imported that data into a list. So this is linking to that data, and because we created the methods, we've got the view item, the edit item, delete item, and so on. There is a Google search, that's the action that we created. But that's a bad choice of customer to do a Google search on, so we'll go down to another one, do a Google search, and there's the action that we created. So opening up Google straight away, and we can look up that customer using the external list there. What we could also do is build a page. So so what we'll do here is just add a simple page. Let's call that BCS webinar. And we'll choose a layout, a couple of columns, and let's have a look at some of these relationships that we can do. So I'm going to go to the business data list web part, and these are out of the box web parts. You get the web parts with the enterprise version of SharePoint. You can use BCS with any version of SharePoint, but it's limited to just the external list. You need the enterprise to get the web parts and the search and all that sort of thing. So the BDC list web part will just, in fact, let's just make sure that that page is saved. There we go. Otherwise, sometimes we go to modify the properties and the web parts have disappeared by the time we come back. So, so here we'll look at the type. So there's customers. We'll add that onto the page. Okay. And on the right-hand side, we'll configure that web part to point to orders. So you can see that it's bringing back a limited number of external content types, only the ones which have an association to customers. So we can apply that. Okay, now it says in order to use that, relationship, we need to connect the web parts together. So we do that. We go to connections, send an item to the orders. And then we could do the same again. We could go and add another web part on the page there, which will be another related list web part. Open up the tool pane for that. And we'll point that to the order details. And let's just OK it. Save and close. We'll make this full screen just so that we can see it all. So now as I select a customer, notice that we see the orders for that customer there on the right hand side. And if we select, oh sorry, I didn't connect those two. Let's just edit the page again. So we do need to connect these web parts as well. There we go. So we're going to send the connection to the order details. Yeah. So now we've got the ability to select a customer, see the orders for that customer, select an order, and to see the order details there. Okay, so that can be done purely out of the box. What BCS MetaMan has allowed you to do is do it very quickly without the learning curve. Again, you could do it for multiple data sources. It doesn't have to be SQL. You could connect to Salesforce and all sorts of things. All right, so let's take a look at another product. So that was BCS MetaMan. So we'll take a look at the data viewer web part now and see why we have a data viewer web part. One of the things about an external list or one of these BDC web parts is we've basically lost the designer in SharePoint Designer. So if you go into SharePoint Designer 2013 today, you find that there's a code tab, but there's no design tab. So that means that if we want to do any design work on any of this, then we need to do it in XSLT. Now you might think, well, there's not really a great deal of design work that we need to do. We've got our data and that's the key thing. But let's just take, for example, the unit price column. The unit price, we don't have a currency symbol, and we've also got 4 decimal places there, which we don't want to see. So users can be quite picky on that sort of thing. So how do we go through and style that? Well, the answer is XSLT, unfortunately. So you need to go into XSLT to fix it. So if you're in an external list or if you're inside a web part, simply we'd go through, edit the page, hit the drop down, go to edit web part, and go to the XSL editor. And in here is where you would need to start fixing the display of that data. And that's not something that I've particularly got time to do or want to do either. So the data viewer is a web part that we can simply drop onto the page, and let's just drop it here to the right. So we'll go to Insert Web Part. We'll select the Lightning Tools web part. So this is one of our web parts now. And we'll choose the Lightning Data Viewer. And the Lightning Data Viewer is available not just for SharePoint on-prem, but also available for Office 365 as an app as well. We can hit the drop down inside the data viewer and go to Configure Web Part. Okay, so when we go to configure the web part, it launches this dialog box, and we can simply go through and configure the view. So in the drop down, it shows us the different data sources that we can work with. So we can work with Microsoft SQL or SQL directly, likewise with Oracle and ODBC again. We can also connect to a SharePoint list, and that could be a SharePoint list anywhere in the farm. We can also connect to OData, XML, and so on, or we've got this external data source provider, which is BCS. There's a choice of different display providers, so you can, if you want, use this and write some code, or you can use the grid view option where you don't need to. The data source tab allows me to go through and select the the entity that I want to work with. So in the drop down here, these are all my my external content types that we've created. So there's customers as an example. We've got orders and order details that we just created. Let's actually go for products, since we want to fix one of the issues in products. So I think that's at the top here. Okay, and we can then map the finder method, the creator method if you had created one, and so on. So they can all be mapped to the methods inside the external content type. So since we did create one in customers, you'll notice that the add new customers is under the creator, the update customers is under the update method, and so on. But what we'll do is just work with products initially. And I've lost it again. It's not the SAP products. There we go. It's that one there. In fact, that does happen to have the methods. And once we've done that, we can go across to the columns tab and choose the columns that we want to display from that data source. So a simple case of selecting them. You can drag them and drop them into a different order if you want to. You can also create calculated columns. So if I wanted to have a total stock, which took my units in stock and simply added that to the units on order, we could do that sort of thing. And then we have a total stock, so very easy to go through and create some calculated columns. You can filter these as well, and if we go to the advanced filtering, you'll notice that you can also filter across columns should you wish to. So we could have a filter based on units in stock and units on order, set them both to 0, and then we'd know what we're out of stock on. So you can make that an and or an or, and so on and so forth. If we go to the display tab, this is where we can build our view. So instead of writing XSLT to fix the unit price column, we just simply hit the drop down and choose currency. That's it. So you can do that for each of these. Just set the type of data that is being returned. So you can set obviously dates, you can set decimals, and so on and so forth, and that will vary based on the data type of the column itself that you're connecting to. We also have column aliases. So if you wanted to have a space, you could have unit space price instead of unit price being all one word, and so on. You can group by columns. You can choose whether or not you want to display them if you are grouping by them. And notice if we do start grouping by things, then we can choose the grouping order. Okay, the display, and then we've also got some conditional formatting. So with the conditional formatting, let's have a look at things that we're running low on. So what we can do is go through and apply a forecolor or a background color to some data. So we'll choose, yeah, not pink, maybe orange. Make it bold. So I'll set this to units in stock is less than 25, let's say. So we can add that. Save the conditional formatting, and we can see that that has been applied to that particular row. If you wanted to, you could also go back in to any of these, and you can have multiple levels of formatting. So I could choose a color that is applicable to several different scenarios. So just simply add another condition, and we can have that based on 2 different columns or the same column with different values. And you can also add another condition in there as well, and keep on going. We've got some pagination. How many rows do we want to see on each page? Which column do we want to click on to open up the item, and so on? And do we want insert, update, delete? And once we're happy with all of that, we just hit save. And there we go. We've got some data on the page that's formatted a lot nicer without having to do any XSLT work at all. We've got a total value on there. We've got some conditional formatting, and we've also got the ability to filter in place as well. Okay, so that's the data viewer. Let's again, just flick to the last product that we're going to take a look at, and that's the chart web part. So the chart web part, just like the data viewer, can be based on data that is inside a SharePoint list, or it could be external data. It again could be data from Excel and so on. So what we'll do is just simply go through and add the web part onto the page. So this is the Calabrian chart web part. Okay, so we've got that on the page here. We can hit the drop down, choose edit this chart is the first thing that we'll do. So this one we're going to base it. Let's have a look on one of the data sources. So we've got again SQL directly, Oracle, Excel, BCS, and so on. So we can connect to one of the external content types that we created. So we could go down to something like the order details. Sorry, I'm just looking for the name of our webinar. Ah, there we go, at the bottom there. And that then returns the entities inside that webinar. So there we've got customers, orders, order details. So I'm going to base this on orders. So we can click onto view data, and that will show you the data that we're going to be bringing back. So you know that you're building your chart on the real live data. When we hit next, you can select the columns that you want to base your chart on. So I'm going to choose the order ID and the order date, just to go for a very simple chart to begin with. So we'll hit apply and then hit next. So that shows a summary of the data that we're going to be returning for our chart. What we could do is filter on it. So if we only wanted to look at a specific year or something like that, we could do. I'm going to leave that as unfiltered, and then we'll go to group the data. So I'm going to enable grouping, and what I'm going to do here is group by the order date. So I want to get find an idea of how many orders per quarter we receive. So we can select the quarter option there. So we've got, based on the order date, how many orders per quarter, and we can get that by doing a count on the order ID. So let's just apply that. And here we start to see our chart coming together. So we'll choose next at that point. Again, there's a sample of the data. You can choose to show only the top X amount of rows if you want to. We can select the chart type. So we've got single series, multiple series, stacked charts, combination charts, and so on that we can build. So this is just going to be a simple single series, and we'll go for a 3D pie chart. So that shows us exactly the chart that we're going to create. We can go through and build some captions and so on. So this is the number of orders per quarter. So we can apply that. We can also go through and customize the series. So how do we want to format the date? So we have a choice there. How do we want to format the sorting and so on. You can change all the labels and all the cosmetic work, number formatting, you can change all of that and so on. You can add trend lines if you like, and you can customize the messages sent back. So if there is no data, for example, how do you want to display that? We can also do a drill down. So what I'll do is do a drill down here so that we'll drill down into each month if the chart gets clicked instead of quarter. And we'll even change the label for that, so it says per month. And we could go down another level and have per day. So we'll OK that and apply it. We can also allow some dynamic filters. So we could allow users to be able to filter on order date. So we choose the columns that we want them to be able to filter on. And we can also allow them to print the chart, export the data into Excel, and so on and so forth. And when we're happy with all of that, we just hit finish. And there we have the chart on the page. Let's just save and close it, have a look at it. So we're now looking at all the products, highlighted some data based on low stock, and we can also see how many orders we've received of those products each quarter. And if there's a particular quarter that I'm interested in, like this big purple 1998, let's click onto that. We can see how many orders per month came in, and click onto a month and see how many orders per day came in, and so on. So building charts is really, really powerful. You've got things like Power BI and so on that allow you to do all of that stuff, but most of it involves having a good understanding of BI products. This is a web part that users can add. They don't have to connect to business connectivity services. They could connect to a SharePoint list or anything like that as well, and get to their data, and basically self-serve to create a very useful site. Okay, so that just shows a few of our products. So we've seen MetaMan on creating the connection in the first place, the data viewer, and also the chart web part. The external list out the box, we took a look at that as well. So how you can build an external list, and that allows you to, your users won't even know they're using external data. The sorts of things that you can do inside an external list are really powerful. So you can go into one of those, and you've even got the list ribbon. So you can build your own views, you can export to Excel, so on and so forth. And incidentally, every finder method that you build in your external content type, so if we wanted to go back and configure another method here, we could actually add another finder method. So we could have US customers as a finder method and save that. So that can then have a filter on it that shows just the US customers and so on. And when you deploy that, that will automatically create another view for you with the filter in place, so that as you go through the external list, you can start to see some of the filtered data. There's also the web parts. We had a quick look at those, and the custom actions as well. And then we've also got the external data column. So let's just have a quick look at that. That's something that's right out of the box with SharePoint. We can go up to the library ribbon inside any list or library. So here we are inside a document library. We'll create a column. I'll go down to the external data type, and we'll call this one customer, and choose the customer's external content type that we created. We can choose the column that we want to store. So I want to store the company name, but I also want to display the address, city, and country as well. So we'll simply OK that. So they now become columns inside my document library. So when I go to create a new document, and this is going to fire up Microsoft Word for me by default, but obviously we could create we could create content types that allow us to choose different templates and so on. So this is firing up Word, and what we'll do is we'll create a document, but rather than just create a document and save this custom metadata, what we can do is drop that onto the page. So here we're going to go to Quick Parts. Into the document property, we can drop that customers column onto the document. We can do the same with the address, the city, and finally the country. And then we can write our letter. And if we click into that customer column, we're now looking up directly from Word to the external data source via business connectivity services. If the demo gods are going to get me, by the way, it's going to be here, because quite often when you're running Microsoft Office on a SharePoint box, you sometimes get an issue here, which I just did. So yeah, if I was using an external client, that would be okay. Basically, it returns a list. This is known as the picker. So this is going to return a list of customers for me. I can select a customer, and it will populate the other fields inside that document, as well as populate the metadata for that document. So when we save it, we automatically get these fields populated. But what we'll do is instead just upload a document of some sort. So anything we'll do here, let's just select a file. And we can choose a customer from here. There we go. So this is what we selected when we built the external content type. This is the show in picker option. So, so what we choose here, we select OK, hit save, and notice that metadata is set on that document now. Okay, so that allows me to then start filtering data. We can see all the documents belonging to a particular customer, and so on and so forth. So quite a powerful feature. That's basically what we just did, showing some of the Word quick parts. But Excel, you can import that data into Excel. Visio, you can have lookups as well, lookup fields from external data sources. We've also got Visio where you can create gauges and so on. And then finally, we've also got the search. So, so with the search, let's just jump into a search team site. Okay, and today is only Tuesday, but already I quite fancy a lager after work. So we could do a quick search on the word lager, and hopefully that will return some data from an external data source. And there we go. So so you can get SharePoint to effectively index your external data as well. So if we go to Central Admin, one of the first things we should do is create a profile page. So that's the page that you'll be taken to if you click onto the search result. And that's just a simple case of selecting one of your external content types and going to create profile page. What we should also do is index that data. And you can only do that if you've got the ID enumerator method, which is what we created using BCS MetaMan. So when we go to configure our search, we can go into our search service application. We can go to content sources, and we can create new content source. And you can see some of the other external content types that I've been indexing here. Basically, if we choose new content source, select the line of business data option, give it a name, and you can then choose your external data source configured with BCS to index. And straight away, we'll be able to, once we've indexed, we'll be able to start searching on that external content. There's also the user profile import. So if you're using the user profile service application, you can import an external content type of data into people's user profiles. So if you've already got like a HR database or something that's full of information about each employee, you could use that to populate the SharePoint user profiles. And that makes everything from audience targeting to people searches just a lot more powerful. The service application you saw me jump into a minute ago, that allows me to go through and set permissions on each external content type as well, so we can choose who's allowed to see this data. Just because it's in SharePoint doesn't mean that everybody that can access SharePoint can see the data. You have to go through and set permissions on who can see the data as well. Creating the external content type, as I mentioned, you could use SharePoint Designer, you could use Visual Studio, or you can use BCS MetaMan as well. So they're the three choices that you've got. And just to summarize, the SharePoint Designer doesn't allow you to create connections to anything but SQL. So that's why you would use the other two, is if you wanted to connect to another data source. What we defined, the different methods, the finder, specific finder, creator, updater, deleter, and ID enumerator. And it also has other properties, filters, custom actions, the office item type, and the title column, and things like that set inside that external content type as well. The final one to mention is OData. So how do you expose things as OData? Well, what you can do is go into Visual Studio, and there is a wizard that allows you to connect to the external data source and expose it as OData. You could then either use BCS MetaMan to connect to the OData service URL and build an external content type around that, or you can also deploy as an app to SharePoint 2013 or Office 365. That does just give you an external list, none of the other stuff. So worth pointing out. Okay, so that almost brings us to a close. Let me just show you also very briefly in Office 365. So here we go. This just shows some of that same data being made available via OData. So so we're in Office 365, and you can build external lists as well using that. Another option for you is to also use a service bus to get that data from on-prem into SQL Azure and then connect to it via that. So again, MetaMan could be used to connect to SQL Azure and generate the external content type. But if you go into your admin page in Office 365, if you do use Office 365, and come down to SharePoint, okay, so in here BCS is listed, so we can go to BCS on the quick launch there, or on the left nav. Okay, this is Office 365, just taking a little bit of time today, so sorry about that. There we go. So, so under BCS, you can manage your BDC models, business data connectivity models, and external content types. So going into that option will show you what existing external content types you have, and also allow you to import some more. And in there you can see, yeah, there's lots of different external content types that were created using BCS MetaMan on Northwind data, on OData, and also with SQL Azure as well. Okay, so that kind of brings us to a close. If you have any questions, or if you'd like to see a more detailed demo or anything like that, please get in touch. So there's telephone numbers there, so you've got our UK number and our US number. We'd be happy to help you with any BCS questions that you might have. There's also our website. If you go onto lightningtools.com, you'll find lots of information on BCS there, the products that you saw, and also on our blog, we're quite often blogging about business connectivity services, the limitations of it, also how to configure different connections to different data sources and so on. And also follow us on Twitter and like our Facebook page. We have lots of information that we put out there as well. Or you can contact me on brett@lightningtools.com. Before we close, if anybody's got a question and they want to ask it now, feel free. All you need to do is just raise your hand, and you can do that just by clicking the raise hand button. And what I'll do is unmute you, and you'll be able to ask your question. Okay, so we've got a question from Carlos. Carlos, I'm just going to unmute you. Hi, Carlos. Do you hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Hi, I'm US, Miami specifically. I've been following you for a long time. Specific question is, I know, or I've been trying this before, but there is some limitations on the views that SharePoint allows to have in one specific view 2,000 or 5,000 rows. So how are you dealing with that? Because the graphics that you show us and also the list can go really large and dynamically. So at what point are you limiting the query, or how do you deal with it?
Okay, so great question on the list limitations, so the external list limitations. So yeah, you're quite right. You have a limit of 2,000 items per view, but that can be extended by that's just a threshold that can be extended using PowerShell to 5,000. But that is per view. So a couple of things there. Remember, you can create the limit filter, but you can also create a filter on each finder method and have multiple finder methods. So if there's a way of segregating the data, you could, for instance, separate your customers into different countries or different regions, and that would, I mean, you might have, for instance, 50,000 customers, but you've got less than 5,000 in each region. So if you create multiple finder methods with a filter on it, then you'll be able to get those all inside the external list. Now the limitation is just on the external list itself. It's not a BCS limitation. So the data viewer that I showed you doesn't have that same limitation, if that helps.
Okay, thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Thanks. Okay, so I don't see any other raised hands. Once more, if you want to ask a question, just feel free to raise your hand and I'll unmute you and you'll be able to ask your question. Okay, it doesn't, oh, sorry, yep, we have one just last minute. So Jeff, I'm going to unmute you, Jeff Brees. Hi, Jeff.
Hello.
So you have a question?
Yes. Is it possible to use BCS data in a workflow using web service call action, specifically SharePoint 2013 or Nintex?
Okay, so fantastic question. So can you use the data inside a SharePoint workflow using Designer or specifically Nintex? So yeah, if we take an external list, first thing to know about that is the data is linked to and not stored inside that external list. So if the underlying data changes and it didn't change via SharePoint, then SharePoint won't know that the data's changed until you just won't know at all. So what you can do is the external lists allow you to write a bit of code that uses a notification service. So effectively, it's going to trap the events that cause a item to change. So once that has changed, yeah, you can fire off a workflow or something like that. I know Nintex is very fond of business connectivity services. In fact, the one of the owners of Nintex, Mike Fitzmaurice, was actually the person who worked for Microsoft at the time and invented the business data catalog and all of this that we see here today. Yeah, he has done a lot of work with MetaMan and customized his workflows to work with BCS data as well. So I don't know specifically what they've done, but I'm sure if you speak to them directly, they'll be able to point you in the right direction.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, I think Carlos might have another question. Carlos?
Yeah, I got, he bring me to another question. When I have the external list or the external content type, and I'm working with other products such as K2, do I need, probably, I'm not sure if you know or not, but do I need to create the external list, or probably I will be able to grab the object from K2 without having to create external list?
Yeah, I'm not that knowledgeable on K2 specifically, but yeah, because there is the API around BCS as well,
Yes.
more than likely you would be able to connect to it that way and grab the item.
Okay. Okay.
All
yeah,
right.
Makes sense.
Okay.
I'll try it anyway.
All right. Thanks, Carlos. Okay, we have Lionel Remond. Hi, Lionel.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Good. Hi. I'm just going to go back to almost the beginning. So
Okay.
you managed to create super quickly new external content type with customers, orders, and all the details, and then did some associations with them. Put that in three different web parts, all linked to each other. And we start with the customer, get all the details, and then the orders, and then the details from the order we pick. The only thing is, when you look at the older web parts, you get only the customer ID, which is not very user-friendly. Would you happen to know how to display the customer name rather than the ID in a list where you have the orders, for example?
So the key thing there is that the customer ID is obviously the primary key that maps to the foreign key. What you can do is go through. Let me just see if we can do this. Let's just find out where we were. Sorry. Okay, so we had a page in here. Let's just go and access that page. Okay, so here's our customer ID with the orders and the order details. Now, what you can do is you can go through and modify these pages and modify the web part, and then you get the edit view link. And under that edit view link, you can select which columns you actually want to show. So I can remove customer ID from there and OK it. So now when we're on that page, sorry, I just clicked off of it. So now we're on that page, we don't have the customer ID showing, but when I click onto that, we're still firing the connection. So I could do the same on the other two web parts and just strip out that customer ID. But it's still the customer ID that's underlying being used to filter the content.
Yeah, so it means that on the order web part,
Mm-hmm.
if I wanted to see the order ID, the customer name, and the order date, I wouldn't be able to.
So you wouldn't be able to see the customer name. You can see the order date, but you wouldn't be able to see the customer name because the customer name is in a different table. Yep.
So I would need to build a SQL view.
Yes. Yeah.
To have something similar.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you. Okay. So any other questions? I think that might be it. Okay, Carlos, you have another question? Hi, Carlos.
Yeah, last one is I noticed you recording this. Are you gonna make it available?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So this was recorded. It will be available on lightningtools.com. You'll find that we have a community area, and underneath that is webcasts. Yep, it will be up there as soon as I can get it processed today and uploaded.
What's the site?
Lightningtools.com.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And under community, you'll find webcasts.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. No problem. Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody for attending. I think that's it for questions. Once again, if you do have questions that you think of, there's the contact details on the page, and I'll be more than happy to answer any of the questions you might have. All right. Many thanks. Bye.